Welcome to this workshop, Breathwork for Self-Healing, and I'll add the parenthetical, Breathwork for Self-Healing and ongoing self-care. That's my hope, is that this becomes a daily practice for you. So we'll start with an opening prayer. So I have the phonetic text up on the screen and in the slides. So later, if you want to learn this chant, you'll have that resource there, plus the recording of me singing it. But for now, if you just want to tune in to your body, get yourself comfortable. And as I recite the chant, you might just connect to your own personal intention for showing up to this workshop today. Whatever brought you here, just reconnecting that to that. And you might even think about your teachers you've had through your life and honoring them. Om Ganana Tva Ganapati Gum Havamahe Kavin Kavinam Upamashravastamam Jeshtarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspata Anak Shrinvandutibhi Siddha Sadhanam Om Shri Mahaganapataye Namaha. So that's a Vedic mantra that asks that the Lord of Lords come to us and hear our prayers. Oh, I've got someone who just came into the waiting room. I'll let them in. Okay. So do you see the next slide that says our yoga teachers? Great. Everything is working. So just to take a moment to honor the yoga lineage that I've learned from and studied within for many years. And really, it all comes down to these three figures, starting with Patanjali, the great sage of yoga, who wrote the Yoga Sutra, which my teachers considered the core text of yoga. And all of the teachers that I've studied with have studied with these two men, Krishnamacharya and his son Desikachar. Krishnamacharya I really see as a prototype of the modern yogi. He was born in 1888. I grew up in a Brahmanic family, was really being groomed to be a priest in that order. They were Vaishnavites. And he had a calling in his teenage years to study yoga. And he was also a very kind of shamanic figure. He was known as a great healer. And you know, he had an experience in his youth where he fell into a trance. And in that trance, one of his ancestors gave him a yoga text that he later wrote down and has been since published by some of his students. And then his son Desikachar grew up in modern India and has done a great deal to translate Krishnamacharya's teachings to modern folks and especially Westerners. So very grateful to these two figures for bringing that ancient tradition into the modern world and making it relevant and applicable to modern people who have families and jobs. And so I'll be quoting from their work quite a bit throughout this presentation because it's been so helpful to me in making sense of all of the information, all of the theories and practices associated with Hatha Yoga. And I want to honor the Amazonian shamanic lineages that I've practiced within, beginning with the Santo Daime, which is a Brazilian ayahuasca church that started in the early 20th century by a black rubber tapper and spread throughout the world. And that's where I first started to work with ayahuasca about 12 years ago or so. And then I went on to explore more indigenous traditions, including the Shipibo and the Ashaninka lineages. So I want to honor them too. And this is just an outline of the journey that we'll be going on over the next 2 hours. So beginning with my intention for this workshop and also the inspiration for this workshop. Then I'll get into a kind of comparative study of yoga and shamanic models of healing and how they correlate. Then we'll get into actual practice. So I'll go through all the techniques we'll be using in the practice step by step so that you're really clear on how to do the practices. And I'll offer a little space there to ask any questions in case something's not clear for you. And then to finish, we'll put it all into practice. We'll actually just do the practice as I suggest you do it every day. So you really get a feel for it. And then we'll have some time for any questions or comments for anything that's not clear for you at that point, okay? Sound good? We all in this? Yeah. Okay, so the first intention really is to share the most effective breathwork techniques for self-healing and ongoing self-care. I've studied and practiced a great deal, and I'm a very practical person. If it doesn't work, I'm not going to keep practicing it. And so I think that maybe comes from my working class background, just that aspect of practicality. I really want things that work. And everything that I'm going to share today are probably the most effective breathwork practices that I've come across, and all of the different variations that we can find in the yoga tradition. Second intention is to inspire you to actually practice them, because none of this stuff works unless we actually do it. Both yoga and shamanism are experiential paths, very little theory actually. There's a yoga teacher, Patabi Joyce, who was an early student of Krishnamacharya. He had a famous saying, it's 99% practice, 1% theory. So we'll do a little theory today, but the theory is only really to offer you some images for your practice, to inspire you, and to give you a framework so that it feels meaningful. So one of the big inspirations is that, so some of you might know or you might not know, but I also am a counselor and coach. I've been doing that for a number of years, but almost every single day, people come to me for consultations and I hear the same thing over and over. I've spent countless hours in therapy talking about my childhood trauma and still nothing's changed. And they say, now that I know the cause of my trauma, how do I actually heal it? So what do I do? I've made that connection between the symptoms I'm experiencing in the here and now to what happened in the past, and understanding that that was an early adaptation to a stressful situation. But I don't know what to do about it. That pattern persists, and knowing about it doesn't make it go away. So the information, the knowledge about what happened and how it's affected you doesn't actually heal anything. What it allows for is some understanding, which I hope then leads to some compassion for ourselves, that these early adaptations were actually quite intelligent and necessary for our survival in a number of cases. But it doesn't actually make it go away. And that's the thing I hear the most from people, and I hear it over and over again. So people are looking for something they can do to help their healing process. And 12 years ago, I was asking myself the exact same question. So I'd like to share a little bit of my journey through yoga and shamanic traditions to help you understand the framework that I've come to for this practice and why I think it works actually to help heal the effects of trauma. I love this quote from Krishnamacharya. So he said, dukkha, which means suffering, is the unavoidable motive for practice. I love that because he acknowledges that suffering is unavoidable in the human life, which, could cause us to despair, like, oh, God, if all is suffering, like the Buddha says, well, what's the point of it all? Is life just about suffering? But Krishnamacharya, being a yogi, a practitioner, he affirms that no, there's actually something we can do to reduce suffering. And that really is the core goal of yoga, is to reduce our suffering. We acknowledge suffering is a fact of life, dukkha, but there's something we can do about it to reduce it. And that gives me great hope and faith. And that's what gave me the hope and faith to actually engage in a practice. And then the benefits that I experience of the practice is what keeps me going, because I know it works. So this is a little photo collage of some of my yoga journey, some of the teachers that I've met over the years in this Krishnamacharya Deskachar tradition. So the kind of person I am is when I get into something and I see that it's, if it's interesting to me, or something like yoga where I'm really seeing some benefit in the practice, I want to go deep. And I always want to get down to the core of things. I want to get as close to the source as possible, because over the years, things get diluted, they get watered down, they get changed. And for me, I really want to find out, like, what's at the core of this yoga practice. So I spent many hours, many days, many weeks, many thousands of dollars traveling around, searching out the living students of Krishnamacharya and Deskachar. So on the left, you see me in a shoulder stand variation with Srivatsa Ramaswamy, who is Krishnamacharya's longest standing student aside from Deskachar, his own son. And so I moved down to Los Angeles in 2014 to study with him. And he was amazing. I ended up calling him a shaman in a sweater vest, because he's very kind of conventional, conservative presenting person. But when he starts chanting, there's something really powerful that comes through. And I remember one experience. So we were in Los Angeles in the summertime, so it was really hot, and we did these really long, intense practice sessions every morning. We do probably a couple hours of asana and pranayama, and then he would have us lay down for an extended shavasana, and he would sit in a little chair at the front of the room and open up his Vedic chanting book, and he would chant for us for, I don't know how long, 20 to 30 minutes maybe, but in that state, there is no real linear time. And I would have these incredible experiences of, mystical experiences. I remember one time he was chanting a passage from the Vedas that I didn't recognize. It was quite a long passage. And while I was hearing him chant the Sanskrit, at the same time, there was like an overdub of the English translation of the text. So I was simultaneously hearing Ramaswamy in the room chanting Sanskrit while hearing this translation of the text. And it was really remarkable. But when you meet him, he just seems like he could be an accountant or an engineer, which I think was his actual profession. And then we've got people like Chuck Miller, who was a really impactful teacher to me early on when I started teaching. He gave me some great practical advice. He always just told me, teach what you know. And that sounds really simple, but it goes really deep, actually, because my next question is, well, what do I actually know? And I feel like I only really know something if I've practiced it myself for a long time through all the ups and downs of life, then I really get a sense of the effectiveness of the practice. So a simple statement, but has been really helpful in guiding me as a teacher. Just teach what you know. And then below that, there's Sonia Nelson, who studied with Desikachar for a long time. And she's a beautiful interpreter of Vedic chanting for Western people. So I studied chanting with her, and that was also really impactful because she showed me how to make Vedic chanting relevant in my life and also to pay attention to the details, because the power of the chanting is really in the details of the meter, the pitch, and the pronunciation of Sanskrit. And then I've got Mark Whitwell, who I studied with for years and was his assistant and assisted him on retreats all around the world. He was a student of Desikachar's, and he put out Desikachar's book, The Heart of Yoga, back in the 90s, which really helped to introduce Desikachar and Krishnamacharya to the rest of the world. So I think that was an important work. Oh, and then, up in the top right, there's me and Ramaswamy after one of these epic all day long yoga practice sessions in the LA heat. And I love it because we both look really tired and sweaty, but super relaxed and happy. And that is my memory of that time with him. And then here's some photos from some of my journeys through the Amazonian shamanic traditions. Um, Top left, there's a photo of my wife and I, Debbie. It's a rare photo from my time in the Santo Daime Church. I think, at that time, cell phone technology wasn't what it is now. So I didn't take a lot of photos maybe at that time. But this was after one especially significant ceremony in Southern Oregon, up in the high desert. And we all gathered in a crater before dawn. And so in the middle of the ceremony, as everything's just lifting up and opening up, the sun is rising over the edge of this crater. And it was a pretty incredible ceremony for me. It was a real kind of rebirthing process. And it was great to have Debbie there with me. And then I've got a picture of me with some of my favorite Shipibo healers, Damian, Leela, and their beautiful assistant, Tanya. I met them down at the Temple of the Way of Light in Peru, where I taught yoga for 3 months. There's a picture of me teaching some of the folks in the Maloka, which is the ceremonial building. So at night, you do the ayahuasca ceremonies. And then in the morning, I would teach these yoga classes. And it was a really beautiful experience because the medicine work helped to open people up to the deeper aspects of yoga. So I didn't have to go through this whole process of kind of deconditioning people from their ideas of what yoga is. A lot of things have been distorted in the West. There's emphasis on the kind of exercise aspects of it, not so much on the subtle aspects. But the medicine did a great job of opening people up. And so I could just deliver the yoga as I'd gotten it from my teachers, and people were really receptive, and they immediately saw the correlations between the yoga practice and the medicine work that they were doing. So that was a really important time for me. There's a picture in the bottom center of one of my favorite healers, Juan Flores, who's Ashaninka. He has a center called Mayan Toyaku outside of Tarapoto, Peru. And it's a beautiful, magical place. It's not the kind of place that's set up for tourists, but it's really for the local community. So every 3 nights, he holds a ceremony, and people come from up and down the river. They come to his center with their families sometimes. Sometimes there's people who are apprenticing with him. And they all gather. And in his ceremonies, everybody gets a chance to sing if they want. So it was a very kind of communal experience, felt very kind of real and down to earth, nothing showy about it. He's a very kind of unassuming, just happy, chill guy. He's a real plant man. He loves the plants and he loves people, and he wants the plants to help heal the world. In the bottom right, there's me chilling outside of Tambo, which is the hut where we stay in the jungle. And this is a woman, Inez. She's a matriarch of a Shipibo family of healers. And she was just a beautiful woman, um, very small, but very powerful in ceremony. When she would start to sing, the whole room would just like light up and shake. And she's doing what the healers would do when they're not in ceremonies. They hang out at their tambo on their cell phones, chatting with friends, gossiping, laughing all the time, doing their artwork, their embroidery artwork. Very relaxed, uh, happy people. And that to me is such a great indicator that the medicine work is working for them. So throughout this journey, I soon realized that my yoga practice supported my work with ayahuasca and that my work with ayahuasca helped to deepen my yoga practice. And so what I found is that these two traditions from vastly different cultures shared remarkably similar approaches to healing trauma. Things started to click for me. Um, there we go. Okay. So now I'll get into this energetic model of healing that both yoga and particularly Amazonian plant medicine shamanism have in common. Both the yogi and the ayahuasca shaman, they understand that trauma affects us on a subtle level, causing disturbances and blockages in our energy system. The blockages and disturbances in the subtle body manifest as the mental and distress and physical illness that we associate with the effects of trauma here in the West. And this is one of the things that I found is kind of like evidence I've been collecting over the years. And this really struck me. So on the left, you can all see that drawing. So on the left is a drawing by a Amazonian ayahuasca shaman when he was asked by an anthropologist to draw what he sees when he looks at a person while he's under the influence of ayahuasca. So to get a sense of like what he's doing in the ceremony with his healing work. And so on the left, we've got a person and they've got all of these lines around them, wavy lines, crooked kind of line going down their center. So you get a sense that it's depicting an energy disturbance. Energy is not contained in the body. It's just disturbed and incoherent. And then on the right, he's got the figure, it's a basic stick figure. So what they do in the ceremony is they straighten out people's energy using the plant medicine and their singing. And then on the right, we've got a drawing from one of Desikachar's books depicting the exact same thing. And I love Desikachar because he really gets down to the essence of things and communicates in a really simple and clear way. And it's kind of sweet, actually, how kind of simple and clear it is. So on the left, we've got another figure with these wavy lines all around them. And it says prana outside the body. And that makes for an agitated person. And then next to him is showing a figure with the prana all consolidated within the body, and it says quiet person. So the difference between an agitated person and a quiet person is that their prana, their life energy, is contained in their body or it's not. And I just love that he uses the word agitated person, you know, like in yoga and shamanism, there's no word equivalent to trauma, really. And trauma has become a really big and heavy and powerful word in our culture. But really, what is it? It's you're agitated, you know, things affect you maybe a little more deeply in your life. You respond to life situations in a way that's not appropriate to the actual situation, and it agitates you, it disturbs you. I just love that, you know, let's keep it simple. So you're either agitated or you're kind of a quiet and calm person, you know, and we all, I think, want to be more quiet and calm, less agitated people. That's why we're here. So their method of treatment is to go straight to the root cause and restore the balance and flow of energy in the subtle body. Pretty simple. We don't talk about it a lot. We don't talk about what happened. The shaman looks at you, sees that you're agitated, that your energy is disturbed, and they'll go in and they'll just try to straighten out your energy. They don't want to hear your story. And I'd say the same of the yogi. There's not a lot of time spent on telling our story, because in yoga there's this concept of samskara, which is a mental emotional impression. And everything in our life creates a samskara to a certain degree. So the more powerful the experience, good or bad, will create a deeper samskara, a deeper impression, good or bad. And so the more that we go over that experience, the deeper the samskara gets. So if it's a good experience, well, yes, that's a nice samskara to have, like a nice association with a person, so every time I remember my teachers that I love, it deepens that samskara and it stays with me. It's more kind of persistent and available to me. A beautiful memory I had of going to the beach when I was a kid, every time I remember that, it deepens the samskara. And so that's a nice thing to have. You can return to it really easily because the samskara is there. But adverse experiences, the more we go over them, they'll also deepen that impression. And the more present and available it will be to your consciousness, and the more apt you are to react to that impression that happened in the past in the present day. So not a lot of emphasis placed on repeating stories, to going back to the origin of what happened, really trying to address how it's affected you in the here and now, and to take care of you on that energetic level. So beyond the mind is actually seen as an obstacle to doing the deep healing work. So very different from the kind of conventional Western psychotherapeutic approach. This is a quote from a German anthropologist who studied the Shipibo-Kanibo people and their methods of healing. The shaman sees the otherwise invisible body patterns of the patient sitting or recumbent in front of him. The state of these patterns tells him something about the patient's condition. Patterns of individuals who are ill, are twisted or destroyed. The shaman orders this pattern, he repairs it with his singing. The song texts say that the patterns are ordered, made straight, or redirected. Body patterns represent a Shipibo's psychic and physical integrity. Shamans call this restoration of the body pattern, which is a metaphor for healing, calling back the soul. I just want to point out, he uses the word metaphor here. He says that this ordering of the energetic pattern in the patient is a metaphor for healing. I just want to point out that that's an anthropologist's viewpoint, a Westerner's viewpoint. For the Shipibo people, it's not a metaphor. This is exactly what they're doing. It's what they see, how they experience these disturbances, and how they approach healing them. So just to say that, the Western idea that these things are metaphors, or they're superstitious, or they're imaginal, is a way of kind of discounting the experience of in this case, the Shipibo healer. So this is an example of some of the depictions of these energetic patterns once they're ordered. So this is a Shipibo art form called kane. And this is the kind of thing that the women healers would be embroidering while they're like lying in the hammock in between ceremonies. And they would have these giant tapestries laid out on their lap, doing this intricate embroidery, and they're gossiping with their friends, and they're smoking mapachos, the jungle tobacco, and just having a great time. And they would say that these patterns actually depict the healing songs that they sing, so the songs of the plants. And kind of the legend is that a master healer could look at one of these patterns and actually sing that song to recognize the plant, the spirit that this pattern represents. So it's really kind of South American yantra. So the main difference that I see between the the shaman and the yogi is that while the shaman does the energetic restoration for their patients, the yogi does it for him or herself. This is Desikachar. The idea of prana existing within or beyond the body can be understood as a symbol for our state of mind. If we notice hesitancy, discontent, fear of doing something because it might be inappropriate, and so forth, we can assume that there are blockages in the system. These blockages do not just occur in the physical body, they exist even more in the mind, in consciousness. Again, echoing that idea of blockages, disturbances. Too little prana in the body can be expressed as a feeling of being stuck or restricted. It can also show as a lack of drive or motivation to do anything. We are listless and even depressed. We may suffer from physical ailments when prana is lacking in the body. The idea that yogis are people who carry all their prana within their body, therefore means that they are their own masters. So again, we can hear echoes in the way Desikachar describes prana blockages and disturbances, how they affect us on physical, mental, emotional levels, and really getting to the core. Well, what do we do with that? Well, we want to consolidate the prana. We want to get the prana back in the body. And this is a great little illustration of that from his book, The Heart of Yoga. So on the left, we can see someone, their prana is dispersed. It's leaving the body, it's not contained. And I think we can all relate to this if we think about times when we're overwhelmed with to-do lists, the phone notifications. Maybe we've got different conversations happening on the phone. We've got things we got to take care of in the house. We're thinking of all these things. All those things, we're projecting our mental energy and therefore our prana out into the world. And we know how we feel when we get that way. We can feel quite agitated, not so quiet. And then on the right, it's showing a figure with the prana contained in the body. So the prana is still flowing out from the heart, but it's contained and consolidated in the body. So we can summarize by saying the goal of yoga practice is to remove energetic blockages and concentrate prana in the body using breath, awareness, and sound. And this leads to physical health, mental clarity, and ultimately liberation. And when I say liberation, I'm talking about liberation of the soul from the mental constructs of the mind. So we move from being identified with the constructs of the mind, so with the ego, to identifying with the soul, seeing ego as just one part of who we are as a whole. It's the part that helps us function in the world. It's the part that we show to the world, and we is the means of interacting with the world, but it's just one part. At our core, we are a soul. And these are some artistic depictions of the energetic pathways, of prana, of chakras. And I include this to show that there's no consensus on any of this stuff in the shamanic world or in the yogic world. There are so many different depictions, so many different models of how energy functions in the body. Really, what we're seeing here is an attempt by the practitioner to describe what they're experiencing in their practice. And so these are the kind of images that come to practitioners. They have a revelation. Oh, okay, this is what prana is in my body. I feel all of these channels opening up and flowing. And then they try to describe it to others. And somebody picks up on it and passes it along. Another practitioner will have a different experience of what's going on in their body when they're practicing. And so we'll have a different image and a different model. And we can see this throughout the yoga tradition. We think about something like the chakras. There's kind of a common idea that there are 7 chakras and they have all of these names and associated mantras, and they affect us on this physical, emotional, or psychic level. But really, there's just no consensus on it at all. Some systems talk about 3 chakras, some talk about 5, some talk about 9, some talk about 11. Really, it's not about codifying something to that degree. we have this tendency in the West to want to like distill everything down, and so that we think we know it, right? And so we whittle it down to a kind of codified system, and then we think we've mastered it. So we know all the names of the chakras, we know how they function, we know the practices to do to open up those chakras, but really that's just a fantasy, and it's a kind of Western fantasy of mastery. When you really look at the tradition, there's no consensus. There's different stories, different images about how all of this stuff works. Look at any particular topic, Kundalini, chakras, prana, and you'll get so many different stories that'll boggle your mind. So as a practitioner, what we want to do, I think, is to have an open mind and to take these images as exactly that. You know, one person's experience of what happens when they practice. And those can give us images for us to work with, to make our practice more meaningful, to help us engage in the practice more deeply. But I think we should also be open to finding our own images for what's going on. And so as we do the practice, we might have a different experience of the chakras or of the nadis, the energetic pathways. And I think we should really stay open to those images because they're coming from someplace deep within us. And they're as relevant as any of the other images. Just because those images are old doesn't mean they're the only truth, right? If we look at the whole arc of the yoga tradition, things are always changing. New images are coming in, new ideas are coming in about how these practices work. And so we can also continue on with that natural evolution of the practice by being open and honoring the images that come to us in our practice. So in recent years, there's been a growing awareness and acceptance of the energetic aspects of healing trauma within Western therapies. This is trauma specialist Peter Levine, who wrote an influential book called Waking the Tiger. And he has been an influence on one of my teachers, Gabor Mate. He's been doing trauma work for like over 40 years, so he's a really well-respected authority on trauma. And he says trauma symptoms are not caused by the triggering event itself. They stem from the frozen residue of energy that has not been resolved and discharged. This residue remains trapped in the nervous system where it can wreak havoc on our bodies and spirits. So somebody's getting it here. So I think this is encouraging, but really, at the end of the day, it just merely affirms what shamans and yogis have known for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. So for me, being a practitioner, really being into and honoring that direct experience, when I hear, these new scientific discoveries about things like trauma, for me, what I can always see how they're just reiterating something that I already know from these other older traditions. And I think it's a kind of like Western arrogance that keeps them from just honoring the old traditions who have been working on this stuff for many, many, many generations. These practices would not continue if they weren't effective, right? If they didn't work, they wouldn't be passed on for generations. They'd just be forgotten about and discarded. People who are living, in the jungle or in rural India, they don't have time for things that don't actually work. They're not going to do a practice unless it actually heals you. So I trust that, time tested and true. And, I can't wait for science to catch up. I'd rather just go and do the practices, learn from the traditions, and get on with it and empower myself with a practice that works. So I'm going to lay out these 3 stages of healing. And this was a big revelation for me. So back in, I think, 2014, I heard a lecture by Dr. Joe Tafur, who's an American medical practitioner who is apprenticed with Shipibo shaman down in Peru. And he wrote a book called Fellowship of the River that does a great job of bridging those 2 ways of viewing healing. He's really open to the shamanic view, but for him, it's been important to translate that into a Western medical model. I think in order for him to understand it personally as a doctor, but also to help promote it to people like Westerners who might be a little closed to, um, more imaginal ways of thinking about things like trauma and illness. So he, in this lecture, shared something from his resident shaman, Ricardo Amaringo, where Ricardo described the three stages of shamanic healing that he engages in with the patients that he sees. Ricardo said that it's first important to clean the person's physical and subtle body, which he called limpiar, which means to clean, then center and consolidate their energy, centrar, to center, and finally to open their heart so they can open back into life more fully, abrir, to open. So he outlined these three stages: cleaning, clearing, centering, consolidating, and then opening. So when I heard that, I had a revelation, because this three-part process of clearing, centering, opening was the same framework for practice that I'd learned from my yoga teachers. It gave me a framework, and I could see automatically how certain practices fulfilled these three functions. And for me, that's like when it all came together. And I had the revelation, well, yoga is shamanism. It's a type of shamanic healing. And so that was a big one for me. And I feel really grateful to the yogis who've preserved and refined these practices over the generations. So we have the ability now to take our healing into our own hands. So the conclusion is yoga in its undiluted form offers what is essentially a form of do-it-yourself shamanic healing. And I really believe this is true. Enough to make the radical statement that in effect, yoga empowers us to be our own shaman. Now, I think this is important for a number of reasons. If we think about the impact of people going down to a place like Peru to engage in ayahuasca shamanism, the effect that that has on local economies, the extraction of these plant medicines to be exported to all corners of the globe, the impact that that has on the ecology of that place, plus, the kind of cultural extraction that happens when people take the medicine back to North America or Europe, they set themselves up as a shaman, and they start to hold ceremonies on their own without being really deeply embedded in a community or in a lineage. So I just think there are so many problems with the current models for engaging with plant medicine shamanism, that, the more that we can take up our own healing, the better for everyone, the better for the planet, the better for the indigenous cultures that hold these medicines. And I think ultimately the better for us, right? So in summary, yoga and Amazonian shamanism share similar approaches to healing trauma. First, it's about releasing energetic blockages that cause mental and physical symptoms, then consolidating and centering energy or prana. In that, focusing the mind, so cultivating more present moment awareness, so we're not living in the past or projecting into the future. That's really important for healing from trauma. And then opening the heart so that we can open up back to life in a fuller way. Because really, at its essence, that's what trauma does. It disconnects us from the present moment and from being open to life, open to imagination, open to wonder, open to joy. So for me, that's really what it all comes down to, is I do all these practices so I can be more open in my relationships. I can be more open to the beauty and wonder of living this human life. So get into some of the technical aspects of the practice that we're going to be doing. Again, I love this quote from Desgachar. Really simple, really clear, for me, really impactful. The breath is a wonder drug. This threefold process of clearing, centering, and opening serves as a useful framework for a shamanic yoga practice. And I say shamanic because to me, it is a type of shamanism. And I like to distinguish it that way because yoga, the perception of yoga in the West is so kind of diluted and confused that it really bears little resemblance to the traditional yoga practices that are meant to do this energetic healing work. So for me, by calling it shamanic yoga, it's meaningful to me, but I hope it also uh, signifies that this is a different approach to yoga than what we normally encounter in kind of commercial yoga studios. So these three stages give us a great framework for our practice. First stage, clearing. We got to clear out all the things that are no longer needed. We've got to clear out those blockages. And for that, we're going to use a practice called Nadi Shodhana. For the centering stage, centering and consolidating our energy, we're going to use a practice called Ujjayi. And for the opening stage, we're going to use a practice of chanting. And that can be chanting Vedic hymns, or it could be singing a song from your own culture. So the pranayama essentials that we're going to look at, first is the posture. We want to make sure that the posture is comfortable and stable. We're going to look at Kapalabhati, which is a kriya or a cleansing practice, preparation for the pranayama. We'll look at Nadi Shodhana pranayama, Ujjayi pranayama, and also share some tips on how to count while you're doing your pranayama practice. So first, let's look at this word pranayama. And again, I go to Deskachar for the definition. The word pranayama consists of two parts, prana and ayama. Ayama means to stretch or extend and describes the action of pranayama. Prana refers to something that flows continuously from somewhere inside us, filling us and keeping us alive. It is vitality. And again, I love how Deskachar avoids being dogmatic about anything, about being reductive and simplistic. Prana is this mysterious essence, right? And so he doesn't say exactly what it is. He stays open to wondering, to not knowing exactly. And I really appreciate that. Prana refers to something. It's something that flows continuously from somewhere inside us. It fills us up and keeps us alive. It is vitality. It's the life force, something that none of us can really know. But through the practice of pranayama, we can become more intimate with how it functions in us. Again, Desakachar here. The more content a person is and the better he or she feels, the more prana is inside. The more disturbed a person is, the more prana is dissipated and lost. Again, getting right down to the essence of it. So what this practice is intended for. Right? Really simple and clear. Not getting into, we got to open up the chakras in this particular order. We got to wake up Kundalini so she can pierce the granthis, the knots, and, have this whole kind of spiritual evolution thing going on. No, we just want to keep our prana in our body so we're not so disturbed. We want to be more content and open. Okay. One definition of the word yogi is one whose prana is all within his body. Again, so simple. Of course, what happens when the prana is inside your body? You're healthy, you're calm, clear-minded, you're liberated from suffering, at least to a certain degree. So the first aspect of our pranayama practice that we want to pay attention to is our posture. So we want to make sure that our posture is stable and comfortable so that we can just set up the posture and focus in on the more subtle aspects like breathing. For some people, sitting on the floor is just fine. I encourage you to always use some kind of support, especially if you grew up in the West, you grew up sitting in chairs, not cross-legged on the floor. So for most Westerners, we want some support. We want to lift the butt up off the floor, create some more space in our hips. If it's not comfortable for you to sit on the floor, it's completely acceptable and encouraged for you to sit in a chair. The main thing that we want to do is feel stable, supported, so that we can be comfortable, right? We need the support and stability so that we can relax. So we use props when we need them. We sit on a chair if needed. We want to be able to keep our spine lifted and upright so our chest is open, the belly is free. We want to remove as many obstacles as we can to the practice, right? And so easy ways to do it, just set ourselves up in a nice, stable and comfortable posture. Now, the first practice that we'll explore, and so here I'm just going to give you a little introduction to each of the techniques, and then later we'll put them all together into the seamless practice, okay? So Kapalabhati, which is this kriya, so not exactly a pranayama, it's a breathing practice, but it's different from a pranayama. It's meant to clear us out. So Deskachar says Kapalabhati is a breathing technique used specifically for cleansing. Kapala means skull and bhati means that which brings lightness. So Kapalabhati is a good thing to do when we feel heavy or foggy in the head. So when I studied with Ramaswamy, he used to chuckle at us because we'd have our morning session, then we'd all go out for lunch, and when we came back, we'd all have these big cups of coffee, usually from the Starbucks down the street. And so he would say, "Look, you don't need that 20-ounce cup of coffee if you feel sluggish and tired. You just do Kapalabhati." He said it's like taking a venti cup of coffee or a shot of espresso. So for him, it was really using the breath to regulate our state, mental, physical, emotional state. He really relies on the breath so much. And so he would laugh at us, we're using coffee to kind of wake ourselves up and feel lighter. And he would say, no, you just do Kapalabhati. So Kapalabhati, really simple. We'll do just a little introduction here. So make sure you've got your comfortable and stable posture. Spine is upright, arms and shoulders relaxed. And just notice if your belly is feeling tight. See if you can just get your belly to relax a little bit. So Kapalabhati, we're only focusing on the exhalation. And we want to push the exhalation out with some kind of speed and a little bit of force. So drawing in the belly very quickly, we can push air out the nostrils. And we want to establish a nice steady rhythm. And we focus on the exhale. The inhalation just happens naturally. So we blow the air out, relax, the air comes in, and we just continue like that. So try it for a little while, and we'll just do a nice, a slower rhythm, just to, so you can focus on the quality of the breathing, not going super fast, okay? So really, it's just the belly moving, drawing in very quickly, pushing the air out. Okay? And you might notice, it really does clear you out on every level. So handkerchief is always good to have. Yeah, there you go. When you're doing pranayama, always have a hanky close by, especially when we're in the clearing stage of things. So pranayama, so that was a kriya, cleansing action. In pranayama, there are two ways to extend the breath. Remember we said that ayama, pranayama means to extend the breath. So there are two ways to do it, by constricting the throat or by opening and closing the nostrils with the hand. So constricting the throat, hands free. Using the hand is the way that we're going to explore first. So practice of Nadi Shodhana. In this technique, we breathe alternately through the nostrils and do not use the throat at all. Nadi is the passage or vein through which the breath and energy flow. Shodhana means cleansing. So it's really cleansing the energy channels. That's the intention of this practice. So to do Nadi Shodhana, there's a couple little techniques that we use. And in this tradition, we use a hand mudra. Mudra means gesture. So we use a hand mudra called mrigi, which means deer. It's a Sanskrit word. It's one of the harder Sanskrit words for English speaking people to say because it has a M, R, and G all together. And we don't really see a lot of that in most other languages. Mrigi. So it's almost like there's a little I after the R. Mrigi, mrigi. And it's called deer mudra because when you take your index finger and second finger to the pad of your thumb, your ring finger and pinky will be extended. And if you extend your thumb, it kind of looks like a little deer head. There's like little ears or horns, and then the nose or snout, right? So that's the position we make. And if we're using our right hand, then the thumb will control the right nostril and the ring finger controls the left nostril. So just try that. See if you can make this gesture with your hand and see how you can use it to control each of your nostrils, yeah? So where do we place the fingers on the nose? You want to find that cartilage of your nose, the bony part, where the cartilage and the bony part meet. Like, you know, when you look at a skull, the bone goes out a little bit. So you find that ridge. Yeah, Jennifer?
Can you just go to your video? Because you're so tiny, I can't really see you.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank
Let me
you.
see if I can do that. I'll do that. Let me see. I'm having a hard time figuring out how to switch back and forth.
I think it's just an unshare and share option.
Oh, okay. There we go. Okay, am I big now? Okay, so the mudra looks like that. So first finger, second finger to the pad of the thumb. Yeah, you know, I'm a guitar player, so I can do all kinds of crazy things with my hands. It might be difficult for you. You don't have to make this shape. All you want to be able to do is use your thumb and ring finger to control your nostrils. Thumb, ring finger. You'll have time to practice it, don't worry. And then you find the place where the cartilage and the bone meet, just below that. So the intention of that is so that you need very little pressure to open and close the nostrils. The yoga teacher BKS Iyengar said it's like playing the flute. You want to be really quite delicate with the opening and closing of the nostrils. We don't want to be pushing the nose side to side. You see that a lot, very forceful. And this is just one way to do it. You know, some traditions, they have other mudras that they use to control the airflow. I like, you know, this is in my tradition that I studied with. So every time I do that mudra, I remember Desikachar, I remember Krishnamacharya. I have the image of the deer, which is an animal that's associated with the heart in shamanic traditions. So it adds a little bit of richness and meaning to my practice to use this particular mudra, but really functionally, you're just controlling the airflow at the nostrils. Okay, is that clear? Okay, I'll go back to sharing. Okay, you got the slide up again. All right. And so like I said, you just want to use gentle pressure. You don't want to be pushing the nose side to side. So let's try just a couple rounds of that. So thumb to the right nostril, ring finger to the left nostril. And we usually start on the left side. So you close the right, inhale through the left. At the top of the breath, pause for a moment. You close both nostrils and then exhale out the right nostril. Try to keep your head straight, shoulder relaxed. And then we inhale through the right nostril, close both, little pause, and then exhale out the left. So this is circular motion. Let's try it again. Inhale left, close both, exhale right. Inhale right, exhale left. Okay, just to give you a feel for it and see if any questions come up. So start with the left, exhale right, and then we inhale through the nostril that we just exhaled out of. So there's this kind of back and forth motion that serves as one round of breathing. Okay, we got that? So the next technique that we'll incorporate for the centering stage of the practice is called Ujjayi. And again, Deskachar here. In one pranayama practice called Ujjayi, or throat breathing, we deliberately contract the larynx slightly, narrowing the air passage. This produces a slight noise in the throat as we breathe. Ujjayi translates as what clears the throat and masters the chest area. And so it's important to note that the chest area is considered the home of prana. So we want to clear the throat and give prana a good home in our center. Remember, the whole idea of this practice is to center our prana at our core. And so the heart area, the chest area, is considered the home of prana. And so Ujjayi helps us just create some space and make a nice home for prana so it can live in us, live in our center. So the way that we do this is we make a gentle constriction at the throat. The easiest way I find for people to get this is by exhaling out the mouth, just like you're going to clean your glasses or fog a mirror. It's like a ha sound. So you notice you make a sound when you do that. You don't have to think about how to make the sound. You just go. That gentleness is the same gentleness we want to feel in Ujjayi. So the next thing, which is sometimes more difficult for people, is to do the same sound on the inhale, which is more like making an ah sound, like ah. And so your throat might catch. If you have any mucus, if it's early in the day, you might notice that it starts to rattle around. And so this is helping to clear the throat. So once you've got, the ha sound with the mouth open, you can try it with your lips closed. So breathing through the nostrils, but still controlling at the throat. Can you hear that? Same sound on the inhale. What that does is it helps us to, again, extend, lengthen the breath. If that's really hard for you in the beginning, you can do it with your mouth open if you need to, and focus mostly on the exhale. In the beginning, the extended exhalation is what's most important and where you're going to see the most immediate benefits. Okay, everything else will come with practice. Eventually, this hopefully becomes second nature to you. So because it's hands-free, you can do it while you're driving. You hit some traffic or something, you get stressed out, you just start doing the Ujjayi breathing, calm and settle yourself down. You could do it at the lineup at the grocery store. You could do it wherever you want. The sound doesn't have to be loud, just very gently. No one even needs to know that you're doing it. Okay, so this is just a little tip that I got from Deskachar and my teachers on how to count while you're doing pranayama. So, it was always so difficult. I'm trying to remember all of this technique and I'm counting the breath, inhale 4, exhale 8. And then I'm supposed to also count how many rounds I've done. It's just too much to think about. And some people will use mala beads to keep track of the rounds of pranayama. So they'll say, I'm doing 32 rounds, and they have beads that have 32 beads on them, right? But for me, yoga is really about self-sufficiency. I don't want to have to rely on mala beads or any special equipment to do my practice. Those things just become an obstacle to you doing the practice. Another excuse, like, I don't have my special mala beads. I can't do my pranayama today. Oh, well, I guess I'll go on Facebook for 4 hours. Or I don't have my special robes or my special. No, you don't need anything actually. Uh, they would say God has given us everything we need to practice yoga. So the way that we count in this tradition is we use our hand. And just so happens that it's always recommended that you do at least 12 rounds of pranayama in one sitting. And we happen to have these 12 segments on our fingers. It's perfect. It's like by design. So the way we count is if you're using your right hand for controlling the breath, use your left hand for counting. And so your thumb just moves from segment to segment as you go through the rounds. And Deskachara in this drawing here goes in a clockwise direction, starting with the index finger. But I've always just intuited that, I start with my pinky finger and I go counterclockwise in a spiral. That feels more natural to me, and maybe has something to do with me being kind of a countercultural person. I tend to go against the grain and I swim upstream. So maybe that's just a matter of that. I don't think it matters. I think you do whatever feels natural and easy and right for you. So do y'all get that? How the thumb just moves around from these segments. And when you get to the middle, you're at 12. So you're done. And so with practice, you just educate your thumb how to do that. So you don't have to think about it as you do your pranayama. The thumb is just counting for you. And then, oh, there I am. I know I'm finished. So it's just a really easy little tip that doesn't get passed around as much as I think it should. Because again, it just removes one of the obstacles to practice, and that's what we need to do. Okay. Let me see if I can move the slide. Okay, so lots of information. Let's refocus back on what's actually important. Again, I go to Deskachara, the great translator. Whichever technique we choose, the most important part of pranayama is the exhalation. If the quality of the exhalation is not good, the quality of the whole pranayama practice is adversely affected. So we put priority on the quality of the exhale. Inhale, we can refine that over time, but as long as we have a good extended exhalation, we're getting most of the benefit of the practice. Again, removing obstacles. If the inhale is hard for you, that's going to be another obstacle. So why this emphasis on exhalation? Yoga's essential aim is to eliminate impurities and reduce avidya, which is the cause of suffering. Through this elimination alone, positive results come about. When the blockage is cleared from a sewer pipe, the water has to flow. So we recognize that there are obstacles in our life. Well, it's not our job to fix everything. It's our job just to remove the obstacles. And then life does what life does. It flows. Prana does what prana does. So our job is not to increase the flow of prana and to generate more prana. No, prana is so abundant. All we need to do is clear out the obstacles that are causing its restriction, right? Again, focusing on what's really essential. By lengthening the exhale, we help out that removal process, the releasing process, and we clear the way for prana to flow. If something in us is preventing a change from occurring, then we need only to remove the obstacle and the change can take place. Nature does what nature does. The exhalation is vitally important because it transports impurities from the body, making more room for prana to enter. So again, through the practice, we open things up, we release what needs releasing so that we can create a good home for prana in our center. And that brings us to that last aspect of practice, which is the opening. And so here, Deskachar again puts it so simply and beautifully: chanting can open our heart. And how does it open the heart? Well, the thing that we chant, whether it's a mantra or a song from another tradition, whatever it is, it needs to connect to our heart. So it has to be meaningful to us. So if you don't feel a strong connection to the Indian tradition or Sanskrit, choose something else. Choose something that does speak to your heart. And Desakachar would do this all the time with his students. So a Western student comes, she's a Christian, and he tells this story in a video that's on YouTube. It's beautiful, beautiful example of how he adapted yoga practice to the individual. So this Western student comes and she's a Christian. So he doesn't give her a mantra for Shiva or Ganesh or Saraswati. He gives her a mantra for Jesus. And he relates the mantra in the video. It's so beautiful and simple. It goes like, my friend Jesus, how I love you. Something like that. So he uses the form of Vedic chanting, but he adapts it with something that's meaningful to this particular student. Something that's going to connect to her heart, help her heart to open, feel connected to God, feel connected to life, right? So that's the most important thing. In the practice today, we'll be using a mantra that's meaningful to me. It may not be meaningful to you, but it's meant just for instruction, to show you kind of how to approach a chanting practice. Okay? Everyone cool with that? So the idea is that you don't adapt yourself to the yoga practice, we adapt the yoga practice to you. Because then it's relevant and practical for you and it's meaningful for you. And that's most important. So in chanting, technical aspects, we use the same postures we use for pranayama. We want to be stable and comfortable. I like to use a drone that acts as a ground for my voice. It gives me something to relate to. You know, if I'm chanting with other people, I'm chanting with my teacher, that's where that connection happens. You know, my teacher recites the mantra, I repeat it, and we have this connection, which is what yoga is all about. When I'm alone, I love to have the drone. It gives me something to connect to, something to harmonize with. So I use something called the Shruti box. Let me see. Here's my Shruti box. It's like a harmonium without any keys. It just has these little openings that I can open and close to make particular chords. Or in this case, the drone, which is always the root. So in this case, C sharp, and then the fifth. So if you're a musician, it's a G sharp. So root and fifth, traditionally how we make a drone in Indian music. Also in Western heavy metal music. It's what they call a power chord. So the Indians were onto it long before Black Sabbath. They knew all about the power of the root and the fifth. And then again, to choose a mantra or song that holds meaning for you. That's the most important thing. Okay, here we go. Okay, and then just to finish up this section, things I think are essential to establishing a healing yoga practice. First thing we need is faith. We have to have, first of all, faith that we can change, that we can heal, and we have to have faith in the practice. So that's where teachers are really important. So your teacher should be someone that you have some admiration and respect for, someone that you can see has been benefited by the practice that they're teaching. If the teacher is a total distracted jerk, if they're one of those agitated people, well, I might question the effectiveness of their practice, or if they've done the practice consistently themselves, right? A lot of people pick up information, turn into teachers, and stop practicing, and that's when they get into a lot of trouble. I've run into a few of those myself. Great teachers hold a lot of knowledge, but they're not actually doing the practice. And so they're blocked and obstructed in many ways. Okay. That's a whole nother workshop. Second thing that we need is consistency. We got to show up and we got to do the practice with consistency. It's like taking any kind of medicine. We really want to be diligent about taking it. And I think of this as yoga medicine. I want to take my yoga medicine every day to supplement everything else I do in my life to stay healthy, clear-minded, open-hearted. And we need to be patient. If we think about, when we come to a yoga practice, I was a yoga dilettante for many years throughout my late teens and early 20s into my 30s, actually, when I had my, classic midlife crisis right on schedule. And I recognized that I really needed to do something. I needed to focus on healing. But at that point, it'd been 35 years of building up and reinforcing all of these negative patterns. Those aren't going to be erased or replaced overnight, or even over a month or 6 months. It takes time. It takes time. And if we keep that perspective, like when did I actually really start doing my consistent practice? Well, maybe it's like 35, 40, 50, 60 years where all of these patterns that we now want to release ourselves from have been building up and solidifying, right? So it'll take time. Rome wasn't built in a day, and your healing's not going to be overnight. Now, the most important thing maybe is enjoyment. If you don't enjoy your practice, if it's not meaningful to you, you're not going to do it. Trust me, you are not going to do it. And this makes a really good case for adapting the practice to the individual, which was so central to my teacher's teachings. They recognized that if it wasn't personal, it wouldn't be meaningful, I wouldn't enjoy it, and I wouldn't do it. The most important thing is to do the practice. Take your medicine. So what I'm going to present to you today is a practice that really works for me. It's worked for other people that I've taught it to, but it may not work exactly for you. You might want to adapt the practice in some way. You might want to choose a song or a mantra. Now, sometimes I'm not chanting Vedic mantras at the end of my practice. I'm singing Amazing Grace, something like that. Maybe it's a little melody that came to me. Maybe it's an Icaro that I learned in South America, but it's something that I feel inspired to sing or chant in that moment that's meaningful to my life. So, in summary, for each stage of healing, according to yogic and shamanic traditions, there are appropriate yoga practices. There's something you can do. Hallelujah. For clearing, in this practice, we do Kapalabhati and Nadi Shodhana. For centering, we're going to use Ujjayi. For the opening, we're going to do some chanting. And the main thing is to actually practice. Okay. The practice will take about 15 minutes. So if you have any questions now before we do it, let's open it up just to see. Make sure I'll stop sharing the slide. Okay. So just make sure that we don't have any obstacles before we do the practice, because I really want you just to be able to dive into it, drop into it, and to really feel it. Good. Everyone's ready to go? Yeah? Excellent. Okay. I'm going to open up my microphone so when they do the chanting, all this sound is better. So if you are unmuted, please mute yourself because that'll create some feedback when I open up the microphone. Okay. So first of all, posture. Find your comfortable and stable posture on the floor, in a chair, wherever you are. Now we start with clearing, and we'll do the Kapalabhati. Now, I like to do 108 rounds of Kapalabhati. So that's 9 breaths times 12. Remember, I've got my 12 segments to keep track of. And 108 makes me feel really spiritual. It's an auspicious number. I don't really know what it means, but it's always showing up. And so if I do 108 rounds of Kapalabhati, it feels meaningful to me. We don't have to explain why it's meaningful. It just feels meaningful. So we'll do that. But if you're new to the practice, you might feel like you're out of breath at a certain point. So please just stop, go back to some deep breathing. It can be a lot at first to do 108 rounds of this. Now, I'm going to establish a steady rhythm. You can follow along with that, but if it's too fast for you, too slow for you, find your own pace, okay? Sound good? Okay, sitting up nice and tall. Remember, we're just drawing in the belly nice and quick to push the air out. Focus on the quality of the exhale. Okay, take a deep inhale. Hold it for a moment and then breathe out. So that's halfway through. I know that because I got to my index finger. Were you all counting? Okay. Try counting with your hands. Start on the index finger. For every 9 breaths, just move your thumb. So we're going to finish. We're going to do the second half of the Kapalabhati. I just wanted to check. I didn't think you guys were counting. So don't rely on me. I want you guys to be self-reliant, empowered. Okay? No obstacles. Okay, when you're ready. Okay, wherever you are, big breath in. Little pause, hold it, consolidate that prana, and then exhale. And just notice the effect of the practice. You feel some of that lightness in your skull, maybe a little lightheaded. It's a little natural high. It's a little secondary benefit of the practice. You get a little high. Just notice that. Notice if you feel a little lighter in your body too. And if you don't, that's okay. You know, you just keep trying it, and over time, you'll really get a sense of what the practice is for. And that's important, that you understand it on that experiential level. Become your own authority on it. Don't take my word for it. Try it for yourself. If it works, put it in your medicine bag. Yeah. Okay, Nadi Shodhana. Remember, Mrigi, that beautiful word, the deer. Thumb to the right nostril, ring finger to the left nostril. We'll do 12 breaths, so 6 rounds of alternate nostril, okay? Keeping track with your other hand. That hand is just resting on your leg or lap. Start with the left nostril. We'll breathe in for 4. Close both nostrils. Breathe out right nostril for a count of 8. So slow the breath down. Nice and easy. Inhale right. Exhale left. Inhale left, second round. Little pause, both nostrils close. Exhale right. See if you can slow it down, nice and gentle. Inhale right. Pause. Exhale left. Inhale left. Pause. Exhale right. Inhale right. Pause. Exhale left. Inhale left. Try a longer pause here. Maybe chanting Om. Exhale right. Inhale right. Pause. Try silently chanting Om. Exhale left. Okay, two more. Inhale left. Pause. Om. Exhale right. Inhale right. Pause. Om. Exhale left. Last round. Thumb on the index finger. Inhale left. Pause. Exhale right. Inhale right. And slow exhale left. At the end of the exhale, just relax your hand down. Take a few breaths. Notice how you feel. Notice the state of your mind. Notice any subtle sensations in your body. One thing I notice immediately is that both my nostrils are open now. I'm breathing through both nostrils at the same time. So that's an indication of a balance in the nadis, which also creates a balance in the hemispheres of the brain. So the right nostril is associated with the sun and the solar channel, and with the left side of the brain, the rational, logical side of the brain. Left nostril is called Chandra, is the moon channel. Related to the right side of the brain, our creative, intuitive side. You know, in the old tradition, they might say the male and female parts, the Shiva Shakti, but in the oldest, it's not gendered. It's the sun and the moon. And that to me speaks more of the qualities. You know, the sun is bright and intense and focused and penetrating. The moon is soft and reflective, right? So there's ways to trigger those states using this alternate nostril breathing, and that's for another workshop. But there's ways to get prescriptive about the practice. This Nadi Shodhana is really about finding that balance, about clearing both the solar and the lunar channel. So I find some balance. Now, let's do the Ujjayi breathing, the centering part. We want to make a nice home for prana in the center of our body. So we're going to focus our attention here in this heart space. And we'll do 12 breaths. So again, encourage you to practice counting with your hand. So we want it to become second nature. You don't have to think about it. Okay. So following along, inhale with sound at the throat. Focus on the chest. Exhale. See if you can slow the exhale down, twice the length of the inhale. Inhale 4. Exhale for a count of 8. Inhale 4. Exhale 8. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. You can try a longer pause. Exhale. You might have to find your own rhythm here. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. And just try a few rounds on your own. Notice how it mimics the breathing that we do naturally when we're in a deep sleep. So when the practice becomes second nature, it's a way for us to calm, center ourselves, drawing our prana into our core. So when the mind wanders, when it starts thinking about something else, you bring it back to the sensation of the breath, bring it back to the focus in the heart. So where attention goes, prana flows. So if your attention is escaping, so is your prana. So you bring it back to the heart. Okay, and then finishing up, so you just release the restriction at your throat. Take a couple breaths naturally. Notice how you feel. Notice the effects of the practice. Clearing, centering, now opening. So feel free to chant along with me. If you're not comfortable chanting out loud in the space you're in, chant along internally, right? Just as effective if you have intention and you pay attention to the details. So if you're chanting silently to yourself, you pay as much attention to the detail of pitch and intonation and pronunciation as you do when you're chanting in front of your teacher who you don't want to offend, you want to impress, right? So when we're chanting to something greater than ourselves. It could be our teacher, it could be a deity, it could be to nature, or an element of nature like fire, earth, or water. So we want to do it with lots of intention, respect, and care. And then all our mistakes will be forgiven. If we do it with attention, respect, and care, whatever mistakes we make in our pronunciation or anything else will be forgiven. So because this is my first online workshop, it's our first gathering as a little group, I think it's appropriate to chant to Ganesha, Ganapati, the Lord of new beginnings, the Lord of gatherings, and of course most famously known as the remover of obstacles. So something that came to me, an inspiration that came to me, is to work with shamanic tools in my yoga practice. So one of the ways I do that is by bringing the drum and the rattle into my Vedic chanting practice. And at first I was a little shy about doing that. I thought, well, who am I to innovate? And then I got a message, maybe from my inner teacher, maybe from one of my teachers beyond, said, this is authentic to you. and your path through these different traditions. And it works. I find that the drum and the rattle really help potentiate the power of the mantra. And then, if I needed further justification, Shiva used the drum, the damaru, which mimicked the heartbeat. And as long as Shiva's beating his drum, life continues. So, chanting to Ganesha, remover of obstacles, I like to use the rattle. Rattle for me really breaks up and clears energy, especially when I rattle in front of my heart. But if you've got a drum, feel free to try drumming along. Just think about it as practicing finding the rhythm of the mantra, okay? So start with my drone. And then I want to just tune into the drone at first. I do that by humming, so I feel the vibration in my body. And I feel when I'm in harmony with the drone. That's why I like that, the feedback I get there. When I'm out of tune, I feel the dissonance. There's like a rattling inside of me. So it's just like tuning a guitar string. You'll hear when it comes into tune. And we'll keep this mantra really simple. Om Gang Ganapataye Namaha. You can listen to me do it a few times and then just see if you can drop into the rhythm yourself. Om Gang Ganapataye Namaha. 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 Just keep your awareness turned inward. Notice how you feel. So I know that the mantra I've chosen is the right one. When after I've chanted it for a while, something opens. Sometimes I start laughing, We're smiling. Sometimes tears come. Yesterday when we did this mantra, I was laughing and one of my friends was crying. So it opens up different things in us, right? Ganesha, remover of all obstacles. The practice is to open up whatever is restricting us, the flow of life force in us. And so we know it works when emotions come, when memories come, when dreams come. So as you do your practice, please just pay attention to all of that. What are the images coming to my mind as I do this practice? What are the emotions? What are the memories? What are the inspirations? Well, each of us can be a carrier of the lineage of yoga. If we're open to the inner teacher, which is no different from the first teacher, you know. So that's the whole practice right there. Clearing, centering, opening. I hope that framework gives you some clarity as to how to practice and what to practice. Very simple, but I guarantee that if you do that every day for a month, you'll see big changes on every level of your being. And so, as we wrap up, I want to challenge you to take up this simple 15-minute practice and try it for yourself. It's a grand experiment. Yoga, shamanism, and I would say depth psychology are all sciences of the soul. And so we can all be scientists of the soul if we have the right practice. Practice is how we explore these realms of body, mind, energy, and soul, so that we know for ourselves. We don't rely on any external authorities. We don't become dogmatic. We stay open to life and let life teach us. And so the goal of the practice is really just to connect us to life so that we can learn, grow, and heal. So that's 2 hours. Amazing how these things just work out perfectly, when you're in the flow. If you have to go, thank you so much for coming, but I will stick around for a little while. If you have any questions, you can just hang out and we can have a little chat. You can ask me anything. Just like if I was to do this in a studio, the real stuff always happens after the workshop in the hallway. People grab me and go, oh, what about this? What about that? Or that was great, or, whatever. So we'll leave a little time for that. But if you have to go, thank you so much for coming. You'll get some follow-up email from me to get the download of the recording, praying that it works out. And if you have any questions, you can reach out. So if you want, you can unmute and say goodbye or ask a question, or you can leave. It's up to you. Questions, comments?
Yes. Hey Brian. So I really appreciated that. I've been kind of doing some psychoanalysis of the different religions and how they kind of connect in different ways. Like in Islam, there's the prayers, which is like the kind of like the asanas. And I'm like, whoa. So like seeing the connection and commonality between these different practices, it's really neat. And I liked how you kind of laid out the three different aspects: the centering, the clearing, and then the opening.
Clearing
And
first, then centering, then opening. Yeah.
neither was something off, but clearing,
Like
centering.
Deskachar would say, we got to clear out the rubbish first.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Great. Loved it. And I loved the 15-minute practice. What I have a question on is there's so many different things that we're, open to now. We're exposed to, like, oh, this practice, that practice, this practice. Like, and maybe this is the Western mindset in me, but I'm like, what if, is there one thing that I can do on a daily basis that is like, if I can't do anything, just do this, and that will be okay. That'll be a good start.
Yeah. Ujjayi breathing. I think it's the most effective, the most practical, the most accessible of all of the pranayama practices because I can do it anywhere.
Mm.
And after years of practicing it, it has really become not even second nature, but I'd say first nature. Because when I'm stressed, my body automatically starts doing ujjayi breathing now. I don't even have to think about it. You know, when we start a practice, there's like 3 stages of learning. The first one is conscious incompetence, right? Like, I know I'm not good at this yet, right? Second stage is conscious competence. Ooh, I'm getting pretty good at this now. I think I've got the hang of it. Third stage is unconscious competence, where I'm good at it and I don't even have to think about it. It's like first nature, like breathing, right? So ujjayi to me has been the most helpful in my life. I use it all the time and I do it unconsciously. Yeah. So I'd say if you have time for one thing, and you know, ujjayi breathing, riding your bike, walking down the street, you can practice it. You know, it's beautiful. Yeah, thanks for that question.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Question, comment, salutation?
I,
Marguerite.
yeah, so I wanted to ask you if in 2 questions related to the practice. The first one is, does it make any difference if you do Kapalbhati first and then the Nadi Sadhana, or can you invert the order, or it's better to do Kapalbhati first for some reason?
Yeah, Kapalabhati preparation for pranayama.
Oh, because it's a Kriya.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So the way it was always taught to me in context of my whole yoga practice, so I always do asanas first.
Okay.
You know, the way that Krishnamacharya and Desikachar always taught was that asanas prepare the body for pranayama, pranayama prepares the mind for meditation.
Right.
That's the sequence of events, very logical, and it's quite reductive if you think about it. So when we're doing asana practice, it's body awareness, awareness of the breath. So we've got body, breath, and awareness, right? You can think of those 3 aspects of asana practice.
Yeah.
Then we do pranayama. We set the posture so we don't think about the body. That's why we want it stable and comfortable. So then we're focusing on breath and awareness. So we go from 3 things to 2. And then in meditation or chanting, we're just focused on the mental, or in the case of chanting, I'd say the heart, right? So we go from a few things to 2 things to 1 thing, ekagrata, single pointed awareness, and then we can drop it all and just be.
So the second question related to the practice has to do with Ujjayi. I've done pranayama before, but not Ujjayi. And I think it's because the first time it was taught to me, the teacher was kind of speedy and the practice did not feel right. So in this session, I was kind of readjusting my initial negative impression, if you will. But one thing that I noticed is that in Ujjayi, not in the other ones, not deliberately, but there is I feel a contraction also in the lower part of my body, more in the abdomen. And I don't know if that is correct or I'm contracting too much. You know what I mean?
Mm. So you notice contraction in the upper abdomen, like around the diaphragm?
Yeah, in the stomach, you know, in the area, say between the belly button, a little bit lower than the belly button going up. And I think it's because I'm not accustomed to restricting, contracting my larynx or my throat. And so my body's still finding a way to do that. And so the whole thing doesn't quite feel right.
Yeah.
So the question is, the contraction is only here, it's not in the rest of the body, I suspect, right?
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that you think maybe you're not able to isolate the contraction only here,
Yes.
that you're
Yes,
kind
that's
of
a clear way
compensating.
of saying, yes,
Yeah.
correct.
Eventually, it should be very gentle. So when I contract here, I can expand everywhere else. So as I inhale, allowing the ribcage to really fully expand. And so that pressure allows for more expansion, right? Because it creates a kind of vacuum effect. Air is not escaping. It's like when you try to blow up
Yeah.
a pool floaty. You can't just open up the valve, or else all the air that you just blew in is going to
Yeah.
come right
Yes,
out,
no,
right? So you pinch it and you pinch it and close it.
yeah.
Same.
Somehow I'm not getting the hang of it. Is there any other centering breathing practice in pranayama besides ujjayi?
Some resistance, perhaps, an
Well,
obstacle.
I like to have an alternative. I don't want to get frustrated in something.
Yeah.
Usually I'm disciplined and I try, but at some point,
Yeah. No, I hear you. So I do recommend that you give it a little try. Don't obsess
yeah,
over it, but try a little bit every day because it is a really useful technique. But what can also just be very centering is breath awareness. Very
yeah,
simply following the
yeah,
breath down and in and all the way out.
yeah, I do
Because
that.
remember, where attention goes, prana flows. So if I'm
Yes.
focused on the breath in the central channel, that's all that really matters.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Grazie. Jennifer's?
All these words are new to me and I haven't done any yoga, so there's a lot of information.
Yeah.
But first of all, I just want to say thank you. And certainly the last part with you chanting, I think for the first time, something finally clicked for me where I could feel my body actually swaying. I couldn't control it, but it just started to sway. And so it kind of reminded me, I'm just going to finish off and then I'm going to ask a question, but it reminded me of like sort of being held as a child and being swayed for some reason. I don't know why
Mm,
that happened, but of course that choked me up.
mm.
But what I'm fearful of is not being able to um, like to lose touch of what's happened here. So I just want to know if you're like offering another workshop or how I could get a little bit more involved in the practice.
Yeah. Yeah. Stay connected to it. Yeah. Um, I think, I enjoyed doing this and it was an experiment for me. Really like doing things in person, and having that connection with people. But I did enjoy this. So I'm encouraged by that. So I think I'd like to continue to do workshops maybe monthly and, repeat this one, but also do some, if people want to go deeper, there's some other things that we can add into the practice, but that would be way too much information for one workshop. So I do want to continue to do that, I think. But I also, I work one-on-one with people mostly. That's what I'm mostly doing. So if you're interested, you could do that. You'll have links to some more videos so you can practice at home, videos I've made. Uh, I've got lots of resources. So there's many ways for you to stay connected to the practice and to go deeper if you want to. But the main thing at the beginning is just to establish that practice. Yeah.
Thank you so much. It was good to be with all of you. Thank you.
Yeah. And thanks for sharing.
Yeah. I don't know how to log off yet, but
The bottom right, you should.
oh, there it is. Thank you. I should know by now. Bye.
Yep. Killian or Jennifer, did you want to ask or say anything? You don't have to.
I very much enjoyed this. Thank you so much. I want to stay connected with you. I'm enjoying your podcast a lot. I feel like I'm being exposed to all these different thinkers and they're all getting confused in my head and I want to get some books to read. So definitely maybe do some one-on-one if that works for us, or if you were continuing to do this, it would be great too. I was getting a little bit confused with just as for feedback, I was getting confused with all the terminology you were using, like with this breathing, that breathing, that breathing. And I have a background doing biofeedback work. And so my biofeedback practitioner was really trying to get me to do more belly breathing. So kind of having to go in through my throat. And I get a little confused when we're doing those kind of practices. We're trying to do I was having a hard time with that. So that was a little difficult for me. And then it was sort of like I have issues with memory. So the whole idea of like centering. Okay, the 3 C's. What was the thing you're saying? Was like clearing, centering, and I don't know, grounding. Nothing like what?
Opening, which I
Open.
suggest we do through chanting. So those would be 3 C's. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's I was getting a little confused there, but I know you're recording this, so
Yeah, and yeah, I understand. I tried to like keep the jargon down as much as I could. I think the slides help me. It helps me when I see new words. But yeah, it'll be recorded, and I'll share the slides with you too, so you can kind of go through it again and trigger your memory if you like.
I also wanted to say that I appreciated what you said about the woman who was Christian. You gave that example of adapting it to her own culture, because I think that that feels, I've studied like Kabbalah, mystical Judaism and stuff like that, and I'm really drawn to that for whatever reason. I'm not Jewish, but I'm really drawn to that tradition. But I feel like I'm having a hard time dialing in with my own ancestry, because I think in our culture, European Americans is kind of like a downer. It's like it's like the not the good culture right now. So trying to find a way to honor my own ancestry, my own people, and not reappropriating other people's culture. And I don't know, that's a political kind of conundrum of how to honor the cultures of other people and their traditions, but also honor myself and whatever connection or disconnection I have with my own people. That's another conversation, but
yeah, but it's an important point. It's an important point. So the thing about yoga that is very much not understood in the West is that it predates what we call Hinduism now.
yeah.
So it was the indigenous shamanic practice, we could say, of India, of the Indus Valley. It was actually, these practices were appropriated by Hindu culture, by the religious orders.
Yeah.
So all the associations we have with Shiva, with Ganesha, with all these deities, that came much later. Initially, like every other indigenous practice, the deities in yoga were nature spirits. The sun, the moon, wind, fire, Agni, Bhumi, the earth, right? This was the pantheon of deities in the tradition originally. Everything else was overlaid on it. It was actually appropriated by the Brahmanic class. But really, it was a folk tradition. It was people doing it according to the culture of their own little communities. So that's why it has so many different forms. And so my teachers always said that yoga is India's gift to humanity, and that it is a science. It's a set of technologies that can be adapted within any context. So it's really about the technique and how the technique works. All of the kind of spiritual aspects, all of the imagery is adaptable, and not even adaptable, but that it comes out of you engaging in the practice. And that's when it's really personal. And that's what actually can connect you. It's a technology that can connect you to your own ancestry. And that was actually my experience. And it's something that confused me at the time. And I approached a teacher once and I talked to him about this. And I said, I'm struggling to connect with my ancestry. I'm worried about appropriation. But I love yoga. There's something about it that just feels right to me. And is it a past life or something? I don't know, but I just know it feels good. And he said, well, what if your ancestors brought you to yoga so that you could find your way back to them? And that stuck with me for years. And at first, I didn't quite get it. It was like, what? It sounded like a Zen koan or something, How would my ancestors put me on a path of yoga to find them? Most recent years, they were Christians, actually Mennonites. But it's actually what happened. It put me in touch with the spirituality that was at the core of all my ancestors' religious practice, and actually helped me reconnect to Christianity, which was like a whole thing that was in my personal shadow and I think is in our cultural shadow. Nobody wants to be a Christian anymore. It's like not in the new age kind of spiritual culture, right? It's like, oh, Christianity, God, dogma and all this. Actually, Christ was a yogi. You could say he was a kind of shaman. I mean, he was a folk healer, spiritual healer. So yeah, it's amazing how it works, how we find our way to these practices and how they can help us find our way back.
Right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it and look forward to connecting with you in the future. And everyone else too. I hope we can continue this on maybe a monthly basis and
That would be fun. Yeah.
be a peer. All right. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.